Bava Metzia is Daf Pei, Daf 80 already. Again, you go through these things very quickly in Daf Yomi. So it got a little bit easier than last week. That's the good news. Much easier, I would say, than last week. And we've been discussing a lot in this paragraph about if you hire workers, like what are the expected conditions and what's the standards. It continues the Mishnah at the top of Daf Pei. It says the Mishnah, Hasocher et hapara. Let's say you rent a para. Now Rashi points out that when you rent a para, it's not just a cow, it's a cow and crew, right? It comes with the pieces, the parts, right? You rented a cow to plow your field. So you need the plow, you need the rope that you pull it with, you need I don't know the name of all these things, but the thing that goes behind the cow that pulls the plow. And it usually comes to the workers also. Yeah, and it comes to the workers also, right? Because you can't just run a plow; it needs people to work it. So you rented the whole apparatus basically, but you did it in order to plow in the mountains. The mountains are very rocky, right? So it's a tough place to plow. And you were charash b'bika. You plowed in a valley, in a bika, which should be less rocky, and Im nishbar kankan, if the plow breaks, Rashi understands that the kankan means a little piece of metal, not the big piece of metal that actually goes into the ground that you pull, that, uproots earth when you plow. I don't know that much about plowing, but I think that's a pretty clear enough description. So if that piece breaks, because you bump into some rocks, let's say, then you're patur.
I think it's called the blade.
Wonderful. I see.
Here it says a coulter.
I don't know what that means, but that probably.
I don't know either, so I thought someone might. But
Rashi says, maybe Charlie knows what it is. But Rashi here, I know that not everyone agrees with Rashi here, but Rashi says it means the piece of metal that comes down from the apparatus that you attach behind the cow that you put into the ground to plow. So I'm sure there's a technical term for it, but I'm going to call it the.
You're saying a barzel.
Yeah, that's a metal. So
that's what Rashi barzel.
Here he says plowshare. I don't know if that's what a plowshare.
Barzel is like iron.
Correct. So if that breaks, you're patur because basically you used it the way you're supposed to use it. So it's not something that he can say was unexpected. But if you are the opposite, if you rented it to use, you said when you rented, I'm using it in a bik'ah, in a valley, which again is an area of fewer stones. The charash bahar, but use it in a high. In a mountain where there's expected to be much more wear and tear, then in mishpar kankan chayav. Then if the plowshare breaks, you'd be chayav because you used it in a way that's inconsistent with what you committed to using it, right? It's a much more difficult area. Now, let's say you used it ladash, you rented this cow, right, to use with whatever apparatus it comes with, to dash, right, which is thresh, the other way, kitniot. You said, I'm going to thresh my beans, right? You have your beans, they're in the container. You need to break that up so that they separate. And you instead were dash bitfu'ah. You use the cow to be dash to thresh your grain. Then you're patur. We'll see why in a second. But the opposite, if you're the dush bitfu'ah, you say, I'm going to use this to thresh grain, but instead you used it for beans, for kitniot, then chayav. Then you would be chayav mipnei shakitniot machleket, because beans are slippery. Thank you. You slip on them. So therefore, basically, the cow needs surer footing, or you need better training maybe in order to work with that. And since you used something more dangerous or more prone to injury, you're chayav. Now, says the Gemara. Sorry, we're at the Gemara. Says the Gemara. Hechi de lo shani be man mishale. If you don't change, right? Meaning you rented a cow and the goal was I'm going to plow, and you did exactly what you said you were going to do, and the plow broke. So the one who rented is clearly not chayav from our Mishnah. The question is, who is chayav? And so Rashi points out that there's at least two people it takes to operate a plow. Right? You need to have one person in the front who's leading the animal, and there's a skill involved with that. You've got to figure out where the land is most amenable to making a furrow. And there's a person behind who's actually holding that piece of wood. Again, I wish I had names for these things, but you're holding that piece of wood. We're putting the plow into the ground and lifting it up and adjusting it so that it does a very nice, uniform kind of furrow, right? So who's chayav? Who's responsible? Who's considered to be the one who led this, plow astray if it does break. So ask the Gemara, Hechi de lo shaniba, man mishalim, who has to pay for causing damage? Amar of Papa to nukit parsha mishalim. The one who has to pay is the one who's holding the reins. Because the one who's holding the reins guides the cow and has to look at the ground, all right, and look and see where things are. And if you steer it in a place where there's a lot of rocks, it's going to break. So that's the person who can do it. The one in the back has no control over where it's going. So that's who should pay. Where am I? No, the one who's holding the apparatus. The guy in the back who's holding the actual plow area is the one who should pay, because he shouldn't put in the ground. Maybe you went too deep. Maybe you snagged something. So that's the person who should pay. In fact, the halacha is that the one who's holding the plow in the back is the one who pays, because if they see rocks, they should lift it up a little bit or turn it to the side a little bit, and that's their responsibility. However, if there's an area where there's lots of rocks, right? It's an area that you're steering it into a place where there's rocks everywhere, then Travail Mishalmim, then it's considered to be responsibility of both of them, because basically it's really hard, it actually seems to say, it's really hard to get out of that area, right? Meaning you can't just move it a little bit or lift it up a couple inches. It's in a really, really rocky area, and therefore the responsibility lies on both of them. So just practical.
Well, why would you say the person who rented it has a responsibility?
The person who's in charge of these workers.
So again, the person who rented it is not responsible as long as they use it the way they rented it. But along with the rental comes at least two operators. And
so this is not explain the Mishnah. This is in addition to the Mishnah.
This is separate, right? So it's asking. And the Mishnah said, if you change, you pay. But if you don't change, you don't pay. So ask the Gemara, but if you don't change and you don't pay, who does pay, right? Someone's got to be responsible. So the question is, which of these two operators is considered to have been negligent in steering this cow or this plow in the place where it's going to break?
If you don't change, what? If you don't change, say that again. If you don't change, then you don't.
You used it as a renter exactly the way you said you were going to use it. So our Mishnah made it clear that you're not chayav, right? It's not your responsibility for you rented this to plow your field. You plowed your field and it broke. So that's not on you. The question is, who is responsible, right? So as I said, there's there's two operators. There's one who guides the truck, right, the cow, and one who holds the plow. So which of those? So that was the machloket, and we said it's really the one who holds the plow ultimately, unless it's a very rocky area. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Says Rabbi Yochanan, a very interesting halacha. Hamocher para lechavero. Let's say a person sells their cow to somebody else, and when he's selling, he says, "Listen, I want to inform you. I just bought a used car last week, so this is something I experienced directly." And they say to you, "I want to tell you, right, Omar lo, just to warn you what you're getting into. Parazu nakchanit. This cow." It has very bad temper. It gores. And nakhaniti, nishchaniti, it bites people, right? Bataniti, it kicks people. Ravtsaniti, it sits down and just doesn't move when it feels like it. So it's a very ill-behaved cow. Or the equivalent would be, the car, the brakes don't work, the engine doesn't work, this doesn't work. And it turns out that none of that was true, except for one of them. Hayaba mum echad. It had one limitation, right? It kicks, but it didn't do all the other stuff. And Sanfu bein amumin, you were sort of trying to subsume this, right? You're trying to make light of it essentially by saying, it does all these things wrong. And of course, one of them, in fact, it does do. Says Rabbi Yochanan, hareze mekach ta'ot. That is considered to be a mekach ta'ot. And even though you told the guy and you said, "I'm selling you my cow, I want you to know it kicks people," the guy can come back to you next week and say, I want my money back. This cow kicks people. I told you it does that. But you said it in such a way that I didn't take you seriously, because you said it has all these other defects, which it doesn't have, right? It doesn't bite. It doesn't, it listens to instructions. But you said it in a way to make me think like none of it was real. And therefore, even though you said it, it's considered to be a mekach ta'ot. And so I raise a mekach ta'ot, and you can go back on the purchase.
Get the money back.
I'm sorry?
And then he gets the money back. He gets his money.
Get your money back.
That's what happened to me.
But if you say mum zeh u mum acher, you say, look, this cow bites and also does all kinds of other bad stuff. Then if it does turn out to bite, that's considered to be informed consent, right? Ein zeh mekach ta'ot, because you said explicitly what it was. You didn't give it in a list of 50 other things. And this, of course, is speaking about informed consent, which is what I do. This is what we do, unfortunately, right? You list every possible thing wrong in the history so that people sort of miss the one that's going to be really serious. So that's doesn't fly in, maybe the IRB likes it, but it does not fly in the Gemara.
As a vice chair of IRB, I'm amazed that anybody signs up for anything.
Right. Well, but that's the point of this Gemara, is that by listing so many things,
Mhm.
you know clearly not everyone's dropping dead without their limbs, so you start ignoring it. Anyways, there's a brighta that says it's about people. If a person sells a slave, a shivcha, to someone else, and he says, look, shivcha zu shotehi, she's of very low IQ. I'm assuming that's what shoteh means. Again, there could be other words. Nichveti, she's constantly getting sick. She's a terrible immune system. Right, she's constantly taking ill. Mishu ememeti, she's not, which usually means she doesn't think clearly. She's impulsive, whatever, mental health issues. V'haya ba mum acher, echad, sorry, and she has one of those features, right? V'sanfo ben amumim, and you listed it among all the mumim. Again, because the person will say, obviously, I saw or I heard that she didn't have these other features, so I thought you were not serious about any of them. But if you say mum zeh, she has this problem, she gets sick all the time, and she's got all kinds of other issues. And if it turns out she does get sick all the time, that's not considered to be a mekach ta'ut. What if you say, what if you say this list, right? You say, I'm selling you this car, I'm gonna use my example, and the brakes don't work, and the engine leaks, and this doesn't, and the lights don't go on. And it turns out that it has all those problems. So in fact, the whole list is true. Right? What if it in fact is true? It has all these things, and you listed them all, but you listed so many that maybe people didn't take it seriously. Amar le Rav Mordechai le Rav Ashi, hachamina mishmei de Rava, that if in fact it's accurate, that you can't say I didn't know about it. You were informed. When is it a mekach ta'ut? If you said things that were true and things that weren't true, in which case the person presumably caught on that some things you said are not true. The brakes clearly work, or the animal doesn't bite. We went and tested it out, and therefore dismissed everything else you said, and that made what you said into be poor information. Continues the next Mishnah. We're halfway down, right at the Mishnah. Let's say I rent your chamar, and again, you have to assume that they made an agreement that I don't lend you my chamar to do anything, right? You can't take it to the races. You say, I'm going to move my chitin. I'm going to move 2 bushels, let's say. We'll see in a second how much, there's a standard size. So a chamar has a carrying capacity, right? The carrying capacity of a chamar, let's say it's 30 core, I think is what we're going to say. So maybe 15 core. Anyway, some number. So I think 15 core actually. So you rent the chamar and you say, I'm going to use it for chitim. I'm going to put wheat on top of it. And in fact, what you do is hevi ales orim. You bring barley. Now, barley, the Gemara tells us, I don't know this for a fact, weighs less than wheat. So the same volume, right, of barley will have a lower weight than that equivalent volume of wheat. So we're going to say in the Gemara that presumably what you did here is you took more barley, right? So instead of being 50 pounds of wheat, which is 15 core, you took 50 pounds of barley, which is 16 core, right? So you used a larger volume and the same weight. Then you're chayav. We're going to see in the Gemara, because even though the weight is the same, the fact that it's a higher volume is hard for an animal to handle. I guess it can't balance the load as well, and it's more likely to be injured. So when it got injured, it was because of your negligence. And if you say tfu'ah, and I'm going to bring grain, which is of course heavier, the violet tevin, instead you bring straw, which is lighter than grain, but again, you increase the volume to make up for the weight, then chayav. And the reason is because volume, nefach means space, is also hard for an animal to handle, just like weight. So the fact is that even though the weight didn't increase, the fact that you use something lighter that had a greater volume, it's harder for the animal to handle. It can't balance it. It's more likely to fall or to stretch, and therefore it got hurt because of your change. Continues the Mishnah. If you say, I want to bring lahavi letech chitin, I'm going to bring a letech of chitin, which is a size. Ve'vi letech so'orim, and you bring the exact same, weight. Letech is weight. You bring the exact same weight of so'orim, which turns out to be, of course, smaller because it's the same weight. So I take it back. I'm sorry, size. You say I'm going to bring a box, let's say, of chitim, and you bring the same box of so'orim. Now, since so'orim are lighter than chitim, the box weighs less, right? So then, because you didn't add on to it, then you're patur. But im mosif al masa'o, but if you add on to the weight, meaning you, and Rashi, we're going to say in the Gemara in a second, that this actually seems to be, at least according to Rava, a new case. That if, let's say you go to the person and say, I want to bring 50 pounds of bananas, and instead you bring 55 pounds of bananas, if you add on to the weight, then you're chayav if the animal gets hurt. But how much is considered to be adding on? Meaning, if you bring 50 pounds plus an ounce, is that too much? Says the Gemara, the Mishnah, Kama Yosif al Masov chayav. How much do you have to add in order for you to be doing something inappropriate and to be chayav? Sumchas Omer Misham Rabbi Meir Sa'al legamal. It's one sa'ah for a camel and shloshat kabin, which is half of sa'ah. Remember, sa'ah is 6 kav. So one sa'ah for a camel and 3 kav for a chamor. And the Gemara is going to say, we're going to see this in a second, that the amount that you added is 1/15. Right, so you're not allowed to bring more than 1/15, which I guess is around 7%. I guess it's 1/15, right? 6.5. So you can't add more than 1/15 over. And this basically we learn from here that the standard size of a camel is 15 sa'ah, or half of that for a 1/30th, not one. Sorry, 1/30th. Yeah, you can't bring 1/30th over. And we'll see in the Gemara, we'll see this in the Gemara in a second. But that basically, if you say, I'm going to bring a camel's worth and you load it up by more than 1/30th more, which is a little more than 3%, that's considered to be too much. And if the animal gets injured, it's considered to be your negligence. Now, Itmar, says the Gemara, let's try to understand this issue, right? So you rented this chamor to carry wheat, right? And we're going to see, as we said at the end of the Mishnah, but you're allowed to bring, we're going to see in a second, 15 sa'ah of wheat. That's sa'ah is a space measure, right? So you're allowed to bring 15 sa'ah of wheat. Instead, you brought more than that of barley. Says the Mishnah, you're chayav. How much more barley did you bring? So says Itmar, Abaya says, kashek masui, that the space of the volume of what you're bringing is just as difficult, just as hard for an animal as the weight. Meaning, if you brought an equivalent weight, let's say you budgeted one chamor worth of wheat, and you brought the exact same amount of barley, but went over by this 1/30th that we said at the end of the Mishnah, you would be chayav, even though barley plus 1/30th does not equal the same weight as the wheat. But because the volume was increased, that's considered to be just as bad as weight. That's what we mean in our Mishnah. And Rava says, no. It means kasher limasui. It means it's bad for the same weight. Meaning, if you brought as much barley by weight as you would equal to the wheat, then you would be chayav, because that's both the same weight and it's a greater volume. But if you brought more barley, but then from a volume standpoint than wheat, but not more weight, you wouldn't be chayav. And so let's analyze the Mishnah now. I'm sorry. Abaya Amar, am I reading now? Yeah. Abaya says, Kashek kimasuitnan. What that means is that nafcha, the volume of the barley, is kitakla. It's just like the weight. The most of shlosha kabin chayav. And if you add 3 kav, which remember at the end of the Mishnah, we said that's the shear for a donkey, it's 3 kav extra. If you brought 3 extra kav, 15 sa, plus 3 kav, which is half a sa, of sa'orin, you'd be and the animal then got injured, you'd be chayav just like if you brought the same amount of wheat. Because even though it weighs less, the volume makes it the same as the weight. And Rava says, no. Kasha limaso, it's not, meaning you have to have takla ki takla. You have to have the weight be the equivalent. I mean, you have to add enough barley that it equals the same amount of barley as 15 sa'ah of wheat, right? Which might be 16 sa'ah of barley. I don't exactly know the difference, right? But more than what you think. And if you do that, then even though you brought the exact weight that you said you were going to initially bring, because it's a larger volume, you're chayav. V'nafcha havi tosefet, and therefore you're chayav. Okay, now it's not. Let's read the next words in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said, we're 8 lines from the bottom, that you said, I'm going to bring a letech chitim, I'm going to bring a volume of a letech of wheat, and instead you brought the exact same volume of sa'orin, your patur. Okay, that makes sense, right? Because you didn't increase any volume, you didn't increase weight. But im hosif, this continues the Mishnah, im hosif al mas'o chayav. If you added to the weight, right, then you're chayav. Now, what does that imply? What we're about to say, my love, shlosha kabim. It implies if you added the same amount that we said is a problem with wheat, you added this with barley, you'd be chayav, which is what Abaya said, not what Rava said. Answers Rava, no, it's not what it means. It means a sa. It means if you added a complete sa, which is, again, adding so much barley, double the amount of barley, right? One sa instead of 3 kav. So a sa is 6 kav. So adding 6 kavim instead of 3, that's when you're chayav. Says Gemara, but the next words don't make any sense. Halakatani, the next words in the Mishnah are, Kama Yosifa Maso Yeh Chayav. How much do you have to add? So according to Rava, it's not true. Adding 3 kabin for a chamar is only chayav if you add wheat to wheat, not if you add barley to wheat. Says Rava, Hachi Kamar. This is how Rava would have to read the Mishnah as being 2 separate cases. Meaning, Hecha Deloshani, if you don't change, right, and therefore you agreed to bring chitin, and in fact you brought chitin, or so'orin v'avi so'orin, meaning you didn't change the agreement. Then the Mishnah is saying, in that case, Kama Yosif, Al Maso Yechayav, how much do you have to add and be chayav? That's where Sumcha says, essentially what we're going to say in a second, 1/30th, meaning, Sumcha said, Misham Rabbi Meir, Sa'al Gamal, 1 sa for a gamal, whose normal carrying capacity is 30 sa'ah, or Shlosha Kabin Lechamor, or half a sa, or 3 kav for a chamar, whose normal carrying capacity is 15 sa'ah, and that's if you don't change. If you do change, according to Rava, you're allowed to bring even more, because since Sa'orim weigh less than Chitim, until you hit the same weight as the Chitim, you're not chayav for any damage that happens when it's carrying Sa'orim. So that is the way they understand the Mishnah. Tashma.
That's Rava.
That's Rava. Abaye disagrees.
Abaye would still say it depends on the nefach.
Correct. Abaye would still say that the only thing that matters is nefach if it's lighter, right? If it's heavier, it might be the opposite, just to be clear, right? According to Abaye, which we don't discuss yet, if let's say you said, I'm going to bring Sa'orim, and I'm going to bring 30 Sa'av Sa'orim, and instead you brought 30 Sa'av Chitim, which weigh more than 30 Sa'av Sa'orim, then you'd be chayav because it weighs more, right? But Abaye was saying that even if you switch to something lighter, the only thing that matters is the volume, and if the volume goes up by 1/30th, which is 3 kabim, then you're chayav in a chamor. Tashma. Let's try to prove it from the next case. It says, and this is a braita, lahavi letech chitim. You say to the person, I'm going to bring a letech of chitim on your donkey. Vehevi, says the Gemara now, sheish esrei sa'orim, right? That's the case. So you're going to bring a letech, which is 15 sa'ah, which is the normal carrying capacity, and instead you bring 16. Okay, so you've gone up by 1 out of 15, right? So then says the Braita chayav, you're chayav, which implies that it's only because you brought 1 extra sa'ah, which is 6 kabim extra. On the top of the page of Daf Pei Amud Bet.
No, but he changed from chitim to sorim.
Correct. So it says the Braita, it's only if you brought 1 extra, then you're chayav. The implication being that if you brought shlosha kabim, you'd be patur. That's only because you brought 1 extra sa'ah. You went from 15 sa'ah to 16 sa'ah. Remember, a sa'ah is 6 kav. But if you brought only 3 extra kav, then you would be patur. Now, why would you be patur? According to Rava, I totally get it, because 3 extra kav doesn't weigh the same if you're bringing barley as it would for wheat. But according to Abaye, the weight is totally immaterial to us. It matters how much volume. And the Mishnah said that if you add 3 kav, you should be chayav. So why does this Braita say it has to be 6 kav or 1 sa'ah in order to be chayav? Answers the Gemara, Tirgama Abaye explained that this Braita is referring to a case of mechikata. It's talking about a case where it's mechikata. Now, what does mechikata mean? So Rashi brings a pshat, interesting Rashi. He says, he quotes from the Gaonim, he says he even found it written in the Chuvata Gaonim, that it's referring to wormy things, that it was eaten a lot, it was eaten by worms. And of course, as most of us probably know, right, the way you detect when things are eaten by worms is you let them float, right, because they're lighter, because the worms eat out the inside, and so kernels that are empty will float, right? So, I mean, I was laughing at me, but I've seen it. So basically what happened here is that the barley was extra light barley. So normally barley would be 3 kav, which is what Abaye said. But here, because the barley was wormy, and therefore, again, not the worms were heavier, but worms ate away the grain, it was even lighter, and so you can get 6 kav extra.
Rashi says, saying he heard it in his shiur?
No, here it says it's sorim. It's sorim. Tilo, the worms ate the sorim.
Rashi says he heard it from his teachers. I mean, shamati just means I heard from someone. I mean, he read it online. But he said he also, right, it's also...
it's sorim, not shiurim.
Right, sorim shehitliu, sorim that are wormy, right?
That are wormy.
So So that's what Rashi says. He says it doesn't make any sense at all because the whole point that Abai was making is that although barley is lighter than wheat, it's only the volume that matters. So why would it matter if you have very light barley, right? Barley is lighter, wormy barley is even lighter, but it's still the same volume, right? So Rashi says I doesn't like that shot, and he thinks what it means is it's referring to whether the barley was actually, usually when you gave things, it would be overflowing a little bit. And so it's overflowing a little bit, so there's a little bit more volume. But these were a case where it was smooth. So Rashi says it means shchika, means from the word smooth. And so basically the barley was smoothed out. So when barley is smoothed out, you lose some of the volume. And therefore it takes a whole extra 6 kav really to equal the 3 kav that would usually be a problem. So in this case, it was 1 extra because it was smoothed down, so there wasn't as much barley on top. That's Rashi's explanation. Tanur Abanan, now says the Breita, a very interesting Breita as well. Let's say you're using human and donkeys, right? Or humans, we'll just call them. So let's say you hire a worker to schlep your stuff around. And they carry it around, and then at the end of the day, they say, my back hurts, they broke a rib, they're in pain. Are you chayav for putting too much on them, right? So it says the Breita, it's a kav l'katef. For a human carrier, the amount that you're not allowed to add extra is a kav, which of course you could then derive from our Mishnah. Remember, it's 1/30th extra. So the human capacity must be 30 kav, right? Which is 5 sa, right? 6 divided by 6, yeah. So that's an extra kav. And an adriv is a sign for areva. And areva is some kind of small boat, I think Rashi says, right? So an adriv is the amount that is extra on a small boat, in a little rowboat, right? If the boat capsizes because you overloaded it. A kor is the amount of size for a sfina, for a decent-sized boat. And shlosha kurim, the borni gedola, for those big boats, the passenger, what do they call the container boats? Which I guess were a little smaller than ours. It's 3 kor. That's the standard size that if you overload it by that much and then the boat sinks or the boat gets damaged, it's considered to be negligent. Says the Gemara, slow down.
Roman ships were not very large.
Right. So that's why I'm joking, because it's 3 times the size of a normal ship. It's obviously, our container ships are, 800 million times the size, right? So it's obviously an exaggeration. But says
a kav is 6 sa, is that?
No, 6, no, the opposite. A sa is 6 kav.
Okay.
Kav is a sixth of a sa. Of a, yeah, 6, there are 6 kav in a sa. Charlie used to have a handy dandy chart for us.
I'm looking it up.
Yeah, we're missing it all, but that's okay. No, that one's easy. I don't know how the core, I forgot how much the core is. It's a lot, but I forgot exactly how much. Miriam's looking it up too.
Basically 144 something, right?
There you go. Yeah, it's a huge amount of core, but obviously a boat's a big size. As the Gemara though, we're 4 lines from the top. Amar Mar, you said that if you put too much on a human and they get damaged, then they can blame you. What, Miriam, tell us? You're muted.
A core is 30 seah.
30 sa. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Anyway, says the Gemara. The Breita said if you have a kav, an extra kav for carrying on your back. Says the Gemara, why in the world would you ever be chayav? If I put a load on someone's back and it's too heavy, they're not a donkey, right? They should tell me this is too heavy. If you walk around with it all day, it's not the responsibility of the one who loaded you. It's a human being. They have a responsibility to share. Right? It says imita de lo matziba bardatu. If the person can't carry it, he's an intelligent person. He's got free will. Lishdaya, let him throw it off. Why is it? How could you say, I didn't know. You put this super heavy thing on me. I couldn't handle it, but I walked around with it all day. So you're chayav for my payment. Amar Abaya, says Abaya, of course, that's true. You can't, among people, you have to expect that they're going to push it off. But it has to be a case, b'shechavto la'alter. You put it on and he broke his, he got a bad back right away. Everyone's had that to them, right? You try to lift something and you slip a disc right away. So it happened immediately. And therefore you are chayiv. Rava says, no. It's even where you didn't hurt yourself right away. The point here is that he's got to pay you extra, right? You agreed to carry around the normal load. If you carried on an extra normal load, a super high load, you get extra, right? They charge it all the time, right? You get extra baggage fee. So that's what it's referring to. Rav Ashi says, "V'hu savar chulshu denakale." The problem here is that the guy didn't stop. He was right. Thank you, Charlie. You're behind Miriam, but that's where you are. So this guy, he put the suitcase on his back. He said, wow, this feels really heavy. I'm sure we've all had this experience too, but he assumed, the guy told me it weighs 50 pounds. That's what I can carry on my back, let's say. And maybe I'm tired today. I didn't sleep last night. I'm dehydrated. I'm sick. So it feels like it's more, right? Sometimes you'll pick up two things and it feels more. But it turns out that the guy lied to him and it was 55 pounds. And then he's got a bad back. That's where the Breita says that he's responsible because he gave him what he told him he was not. It's too much for what he could have given. Continues the Gemara, Kor l'svina. A kor, as we all have just learned, is 30 sa'ah. Right? For the svina, that's considered to be the extra amount, meaning that a svina can carry 30 core. And if you had 31 core, you're overloading it. And shloshet korim the burni gedola, and three core, so 3 times that size for a big boat. Amar Papa Shmamina, you see from here that stam sfinot bat tlatin kurin, right? You see that it's 1/30th ratio. That's what our Mishnah said. So a stam boat can carry 30 core. Lamai nafkamina. So who really cares so much about stam boats? Lemekach umemkar. Obviously, for business, if you go and buy a boat and you get to the shipyard and your boat is too small, it's not the standard size, then you can complain and either get your money back or get a discount. So that's why
they're ignoring Archimedes.
they are ignoring Archimedes.
Because Archimedes proved hundreds of years earlier that what matters is not the volume, it's the weight, and a core is a measure of volume, not weight.
So correct. So these are all everything we said is volume. But I think our Mishnah, I'm going to say, I don't know if our Mishnah is ignoring Archimedes, but it could also be that although, as I said earlier, the donkey, which might be true about a boat too, it's not just whether it'll float or not, right? It's whether it's distributed in a way that's manageable, right? We've all done that. You can lift something that's 20 pounds if it's small, but the same 20 pounds.
That's why I specifically talked about boats.
Right, so I'm saying, so it might be the same thing in a boat, that the boat is a certain standard size, and if it's too much on one side, then it will tip or whatever, even though the float will still float, right? But I don't know very much about boats in Roman times, so I'll leave it at that. Says
Well,
the
the
Mishnah.
airlines often move people around on the plane to distribute the weight. They'll tell you, we want to move you to this seat or that seat.
Yeah, I don't trust that. I think they're always making it up, but that's my sense. Okay, says the Mishnah. Very interesting halacha that probably we have not mentioned till now, which is, we've learned all halachot of a shomrim. Remember, if you recall, it's important to remember. There's 3 shomrim the Torah talks about. There's a shomer chinam, who, as you recall, we learned very extensively, is chayav for pshia, if they're negligent, but they're patur for gneva, vaveda, and ones, right? Then there's a shomer sachar, a person you pay to watch your thing, who's chayav for gneva, vaveda, and pshia. If it gets stolen, they didn't do their job. But if it's an ones, they're patur. And then there's a shoel, who's not a shomer at all. He's someone who borrows something. I borrow your donkey to use, and if it gets into an accident, I have to pay you back, right? Even if it's an ones. Remember, there was a 4th case of a socher, which we're about to discuss later today, of a renter. But our Mishnah says an interesting halacha. Let's say I'm a dry cleaner, right? And you give me your shirt to clean or to sew or whatever. It doesn't use that case, obviously, but you give me your shirt to clean, and I clean it or I sew it up, and then you haven't come pick it up yet. What's the status of that object, which I, as the dry cleaner in this case, am watching? Am I a shomer, right? What if it gets stolen from me? What if I'm negligent and it gets stolen through negligence? What if an earthquake happens and it gets destroyed? So what's the halacha of a worker, of a poel? So says the Mishnah, kol ha'umanim, all workers who have objects from others, they are shomrei sacharim. They are all shomer sachar. If you give me your horse and say, I need new shoes on my horse, and then in my barn, I'm watching it because that's part of my deal. Says the Mishnah, they are shomrei sachar. But because since you're paying the professional, he's basically being paid to take care of your thing, and therefore he has to watch it on the level of a shomer sachar, so that if it's stolen, he has to replace it. The kulan shamru now, but if the professional said, tol et shalcha, called you up, your dry cleaning is ready, come pick it up, and then bring me money, vavei ma'ot, then shomer chinam. Then already he's no longer being paid, basically. He already said, I'm done with the job. And therefore he's saying, you're a shomer chinam, because I'm not being paid, and if it's stolen, you'd be patur. Now, if a person says to another person, shemor li v'shmar lecha, do me a favor, watch my thing and I'll watch your thing. So we're basically mutually taking care of each other. That's shomer sachar. Because since the person's watching your thing in exchange for you watching his thing, even though he's not paying you in money, he's paying you in kind. And so you're a shomer sachar. If you say to the other person, shemar li, I'm sorry, if a person says to someone else, do me a favor, can you watch my, I don't know, my beautiful guitar? He says to him, hanach lefanai, yeah, put it down in front of me. That's considered to be accepting responsibility, and he's a shomer chinam. He is a shomer, it's not considered to be nothing. We'll see this more in the Gemara. Finally, in our Mishnah's last case, which again is not going to make a lot of sense until tomorrow, if you are halveyu al hamashkon, if a person lends, well, maybe this is not the last case. If a person lends someone money on a mashkon, meaning I give you $1,000 and you give me, your silver jewelry as a mashkon to hold on to while I'm waiting to be paid, which we've discussed, of course, a lot last week in rebit and interest. But I, in the meantime, as the lender, am holding on to your silver jewelry, right? So what's the halacha if it gets stolen? Says the Mishnah, shomer sachar. That's considered to be a shomer sachar. What's the payment? He's not paying you anything. So we're going to see in the Gemara, but it's because you have a mitzvah, basically. You're getting paid in mitzvot because you lent him money. So it's the schar that you get for being a lender is considered to be payment to you, and therefore you are a shomer sachar. Yehuda says, no, it's not true. That's very cute, but that's not the case. It's not considered to be payment, and you're not a shomer sachar. But it does depend what you lent the person. Because if you're halveo ma'ot, if you lend him $1,000, then there's nothing in it for you, right? You as the lender are just doing a kindness. You lent him $1,000. In 2 months, he's going to give you back $1,000. You were very nice. You did a mitzvah, but you gained nothing out of it. And therefore, you're a shomer chinam. Therefore, whatever mashkon he gave you, you watch it, but you're only a shomer chinam. But if you're halveo perot, if you lend the guy 2 bushels of apples, and in 2 months he's going to give you back 2 bushels of apples, then you are a shomer sachar, because you're gaining, because apples, of course, have the nature of not lasting forever. And so the fact that he's going to give them back to you in 2 months, apples that wouldn't have otherwise been here, he's going to give you different apples, then you are considered to be a shomer sachar, and you're getting something out of it. Again, we'll discuss this more in the Gemara.
But why isn't that sa b'sa'ah?
Correct. That's why I wanted to refer to that. We'll discuss exactly all the cases in the Gemara. Abba Shaul Omer. Now, Abba Shaul adds, again, something pretty enigmatic. Rashai Adam lahaskir mashkano shel ani. A person is allowed, let's say they get a mashkan from a poor person. They lend the guy $1,000. He gives them his grandmother's jewelry. You can take that and rent it out. Maybe jewelry is not the best example. Let's say it's a drill, right? You could rent that out. Liot posek v'holech alav. And every time someone pays you $50 to rent it, you take it off the loan. So you basically can use the mashkon, rent it out in order to pay off the loan, because you're basically giving the guy a gift, right? You're taking off from what he has to pay you for his loan. And we'll discuss in the Gemara, obviously, did he allow you to do that? Was that a condition? So that's not so simple. We'll get there.
Well,
But
it could
before
be
we
the
get
same with the payroll as well, like we learned earlier, that he eats some of the payroll that reduces the loan.
Correct. So that is exactly right. So remember, there's different kinds of mashkons, and as Rashi points out here, we will discuss in the Gemara what kind of mashkon we're talking about. As Rashi puts it, we'll Gemara mefarish be'eza mashkon ka'amar. Says the Gemara. Now, the interesting thing about our Mishnah is that this seems a lot to me like the 4th case of Shomrim. Remember, Shomer Chinam, Shomer Sachar, and Shoel we know about. But the 4th case that we discussed earlier, and we're going to discuss more later, of a Shomer is that of a Sachir. Right? If I rent something from you, what's my I rent your drill, right? Or I rent a car from you, right? What's my responsibility for that object while I'm renting it? If it dies, if it gets stolen, etc. So Lema, it seems like our Mishnah is not like Rebbe Meir, right? Because our Mishnah makes it sound like if you're a worker and someone is paying you to fix their shirt, you become a shomer sachar, even though they're paying you for your work. They're not paying you to watch it. That seems very much like a renter, right? Because in a renter, essentially, the person is paying to get the use of this thing, but they're not being asked to be a shomer, and they're paying along the way. And it seems from our Mishnah considers that to be a shomer sachar, but that seems to go against Rabbi Meir. Titania, socher, a renter, ketzad, what is their mishalem? What is their level of responsibility for watching something? Rabbi Meir says, shomer chinam. That a socher actually is like a shomer chinam, because even though you're getting the use of it and you're paying for it. No one's paying you to watch it. And Rabbi Yehuda says you're like a shomer sachar, which seems to be similar to our Mishnah, that you treat a person who's using money in an interaction that they're gaining from as a shomer sachar. Answers the Gemara, no. Afilatem Rabbi Meir. Our Mishnah it should be Rabbi Meir, because remember, Stam Mishnah is Rabbi Meir. But our Mishnah could be Rabbi Meir, who says that a socher is a shomer chinam. Why is a worker then, uman, a shomer sachar? Because b'ahi hana de kashav kuli alma va'ager le'ledidi havi aleh shomer sachar. Look, as they say, right? We know that you can take your business anywhere. You could have chosen any dry cleaner on Johnson Avenue. The fact that you chose me is actually valuable for me as a worker because it shows my reputation. Other people are going to use me. So basically, as a poel, as an uman, you're getting more money than just the amount that you're being paid for your service because of this what's called tovat hana, right? This favor essentially that the person's doing for you by choosing you, and therefore they're essentially paying you a little bit of extra, and therefore your shmirah, even according to Rabbi Meir, would be as a shomer sachar. Says Gemara, 1 second. That could be the same thing about a socher. Yachi socher nami, right? Everyone wants to rent your new donkey, but you chose to rent it to me. So that seems to be an extra payment to me. Bahi hana, the kashavik kuliyama, you abandoned, you left everyone else who wants your donkey, you moger le'ledidi, and you rented it to me. Havilai shomer sachar. Why, according to Rabbi Meir, don't you treat every renter as a shomer sachar? Because there might be extra value there. Ella says, Rabbi Meir. I have another answer. You're right. Maybe that wasn't sufficient, but it could be it's even Rabbi Meir. And what's the benefit that you get as a poel that you don't get as a socher is because look, whenever you pay somebody, you never pay them, or you don't always pay them the exact amount that this is worth, right? It could be that my work in sewing up your pants was worth $12, but you pay me $15, or you pay me $12.50. That little extra that you pay is extra, and therefore, in exchange for that, essentially, I become a shomer sachar. So, well, that could also be the case with the socher. Where Tosfos points out, this doesn't mean it always is the case, but it could be a case, right? Socher nami, mila askina could be the case. The kamash v'le tvei porta, where you're giving a little bit of extra. Ella philo says Rabbi Meir. You know what it is? In fact, the issue in our Mishnah, the reason our Mishnah is viewed as a shomer sachar, even though a regular socher is viewed as being a shomer chinam, is because in the Mishnah, we're talking about a case where the guy's paying you for your work. And that, ahi hana, you get extra benefit to tafis le'a agre. You get to hold on to the item, right? The shirt that you're sewed for him. You don't have to go out and get money, meaning he's going to come to you to pay you. So the fact that he comes to you to pay you, as long as you are holding on to that shirt, you basically get a little bit of extra value because you have security knowing he's going to pay his bill. How do you know he's going to pay his bill? Because he wants a shirt, right? So as long as the shirt is still in your possession, you know that he's going to come pay you. And therefore, that is extra value you get. And that makes you into shomer sachar. And therefore, if anything happens to it, you've got to pay him back like a regular shomer sachar. So that's that answer. Or Ibai Dema, there's another answer that in fact, it could be that our Mishnah is going like Rabbi Meir, but Rabbi Meir really holds it as socher, as a shomer chinam, shomer sachar, sorry. That unlike the Braita we quoted, that says Rabbi Meir says a socher is a shomer chinam, that's wrong. And it's kidemach lefrabba baravua, as we're going to have, we had this before, but we're going to have it again. Rabbi Baravua switched around that Braita, and Tani and he taught socher ketzad mishalim. How does a socher pay? Rabbi Meir omer kishomer sachar. Rabbi Meir actually holds it as that a socher, a renter, is a shomer sachar, and therefore in our Mishnah it's the same thing. Uman is like a renter, and he's a shomer sachar. Rabbi Yehuda omer kishomer chinam, and it's actually Rabbi Yehuda who says that you're a shomer chinam.
So, in the first reason is Rabbi Meir always saying that a socher is like a shomer chinam, a shomer sachar, or just in this case?
That's the second answer. No. The first answer was that Rabbi Meir holds that a socher is a shomer chinam. So what is and Rabbi Meir our Mishnah should be according to Rabbi Meir. So why does our Mishnah say that the Uman is a shomer sachar? Because the Uman actually is getting some benefit from holding on to the shirt because it ensures him getting paid. So he's actually gaining more than a regular case of a socher. The second answer is that in fact Rabbi Meir always holds that a socher is a shomer sachar, and that's why an Uman in our Mishnah is also a shomer sachar. I'm going to stop here, even though it's not quite the end, because it's the beginning of a new sugya, interesting sugya. We will pick it up tomorrow. And again, as I mentioned in the WhatsApp, I put it again. We're going to learn in the PM, 7 p.m., because I got to take my kids somewhere in the morning too. And then the next week, it will be in the morning because I have to go somewhere in the evening. We'll figure it all out. So, but tomorrow, God willing, I hope I all can join 7 p.m. And I almost guarantee you that we'll be done well before Mincha. So don't worry.
It seems like here you said Rabbi Meir as a couple. There are a couple answers why he considers him like a shomer sachar in the
There you
first.
go, Charlie, you're free. Well, we rejected the first one, right? Because we said that the first answer was that you sometimes give a little extra. But the question was, when you do a socher, you also give a little, you could also give a little extra. So it
But
didn't
he
really,
gains something in the market. People come to him. They
Right,
get
but
reputation.
but if you count that as a gain, then also renting is also, right? Any human interaction is some validation of the person. So the concern is that a renter also might get that validation, right? Because I have one red Tesla that I rent out, right? But I choose to rent it to you, is potentially something that's valuable to you over other people. So if you consider that to be a gain, then you should be a shomer sachar based on that, even according to Rabbi Meir. And remember, according to that first shot, Rabbi Meir holds a socher as a shomer chinam. Okay,
Yeah.
Shavua Tov, tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. So you don't have to join us in a few hours.
Shavua tov.
Have a good night,
Sure,
everyone.
thank you.
Bye.
What she ended it. What time is it now? End of the 10:27. So I finished 10:45 to 45 minutes. Mother, did you eat your supper? Mother, did you eat? Did you eat your supper? What do you want? You gonna eat tonight? It's 10:30. Getting late. You gonna eat now? Before you go to bed? You don't have to eat a lot, but you can eat something. You didn't eat much. You didn't eat a lot today. You're in a good mood today. You ate a little bit during the day. Well, come and eat some. What would you like? You want sweet potato? What? Sweet potato. Would you like it? Or would you like, what else would you like? Would you like some ice cream? You want some ice cream? You want some ice cream? You gotta keep your shirt clean. Would you like ice cream?
didn't want to keep clean, and I figured, what's the difference? It's gonna wait and I have to change it anyway.
Mother, you want this? You don't want this thing. Okay. Okay, have a little bit of food to eat. Come on, lift up your head. Come on, eat something, please. Open your mouth. Open. That's it. Want to hear some music? Would you like some music? Want to hear some music? You want to hear some music? Yes? You like some music? Would you like some music? Huh? You want to hear some music? No. You don't want any music? You sure? How about some Beethoven? Or Mozart? You want to hear Beethoven? Yeah, I can find you some Beethoven on the computer. Seventh Symphony? You like that one, don't you? 1 pound is 454 grams. Yeah, okay. So what else does he tell me to? A liter of wheat is 790 grams. Where's he get that from? 1 liter of wheat equals 790 grams? Yeah, okay. Slide on that.